Sunday, 8 March, starts the second part of two parts of Rousseau's Discourse on the Sciences and the Arts. The content of the second part is explained in the last paragraph of the first part. That's the end of our reading two, the reading for Thursday. So I'll look briefly at that before moving forward. We're here on page 41. Here is the last paragraph of the first part. We spent some time on the rhetorical questions of this paragraph that explained Rousseau's thesis. And here we see his simple opinion. Knowledge and virtue have what the scientists call an inverse relationship. It is, in fact, better to be ignorant so that you save your probity, that is, your practical wisdom, your good judgment, your good sense in how to behave in life and what's your grasp of what's really important. Now, to illustrate that theory, we're going to focus in. The question of the whole is, do improvements in the sciences and the arts also improve our morals? Rousseau says no, exactly the opposite. He talked about that question generally through the first part, considering history and whole nations, the present day and its advances. But to get a more precise answer for the question, we're going to focus on the sciences and the arts themselves. That's our topic for the second part. Now, he begins with what he calls an old tradition, a legend from distant history. God hostile to men's repose was the inventor of the sciences. There are various stories about this. So repose is your ease, your leisure, your feeling that life is easy and you can deal with it. And so the founding opinion, the old opinion, is that some perverse God who hated us, he was hostile to our feeling good and relaxing, invented the sciences. I've switched to the second page of the reading, page 42, and the left-hand column has a couple of paragraphs that are very important for the argument. It's worth taking some time to examine them in detail. So let us look. Top of the left-hand column, page 42. He begins to examine what the arts and sciences are like by looking at their origins. You can understand anything from understanding where it came from. And what do we find? The real origin does not correspond to the idea that we like to create for the sciences. We tell beautiful and heroic stories about the sciences and scientists. Descartes indulged in one of them. He pumped up the legend of Galileo as the historic scientist resisting ignorance in the form of religious authority and political power. That's the story we like to tell. But where do the sciences really come from? Well, consider them one by one. Astronomy, the science of studying the stars, the heavens, the solar system. Where did it come from? Well, it came from superstition. It came from what we call astrology. This is still popular. People look up their horoscope, they know their star sign, and they think somehow that from the movement of the planets and the shifting among the stars in the skies, that's somehow going to let them predict the future. So astronomy, one of the oldest and noblest sciences, comes not from a virtue but from a vice. So eloquence, the art of public speaking, where does it come from? Well, it comes from politics and trials in court. So what's its origin? Does it come from our virtues. No, it comes from ambition, wanting to get ahead of the other guy, either by getting more votes or beating somebody in court. It comes from hate, flattery, and lies. What do you need a special style of speaking for if you have the truth and can just deliver the facts? The point to having eloquence is that you want to mess about with the facts using flattery and lies. So another one of our famous arts, geometry, you can still see the origin in its name, geometro. So geo, the earth, and metri, measuring. You measure the earth. It's a mathematical science that now we do on paper, but it started by people studying where borders and boundaries are. Uh, and what's behind it? Well, avarice, that is greed, wanting riches for yourself. And what's the point to geometry? You want to put down a border and say, this is my land, it's entirely mine. You can't come on. I mean, you're in the early days of history, the land is just owned by everybody and nobody, like the air. You can use some of it, but you can't, with your greed and your avarice, shut people out of it. But once there's a border, once you put up a fence, then you can indulge your greed. This land that used to be everybody's is now just mine. And in order to make that work, you need to measure things so you can make maps, keep your borders when a flood or a storm changes the surface of the earth. So the basic science of mathematics doesn't come from a pure motive, but from our avarice. Physics, the science of matter and motion, how things happen in a physical way. What is that? It's vain curiosity. It's unimportant. It has no practical outcome. And this is generally a sign that it has its origin in pride. And this is how Rousseau sums up the argument. All of our sciences come not from our virtues, but our pride. We're proud of our knowledge and want to show it off to other people, want to win arguments against the less educated. So that sets up his analysis of what the arts and sciences are like. Well, to know what they're like, look at their origins. And we should condemn them because they come from what's bad in this. They come from our vices. If they came from our virtues, they'd have another importance, and we could enjoy them more straightforwardly. Next paragraph. We're still here on page 42. We're starting the third reading, which is the beginning of Rousseau's second part. Now, what are the objects of the arts? How would there be arts without luxury? And what is luxury? It's riches, the things that are more refined and better quality than they, strictly speaking, need to be. And this, Rousseau says, is what nourishes the arts. When there's no luxury, people don't bother with the sciences or the arts. They just take care of their practical problems. But when we've gone beyond mere necessity, we get into the realm of luxury. You don't want just any old meal. You want the finest gourmet meal. And it's that luxury which nourishes the arts, and the arts nourish our luxury. I mean, Descartes promised us that advances in science would perfect the arts, and that would allow us to solve our practical problems and meet our needs. But Rousseau has a different idea about how that works. The advances in sciences and the arts don't meet our needs. They meet our whims, our unserious desires. We want to distinguish ourselves by showing that our stuff is better than other people's stuff. That's luxury. Um, and he adds to his general thesis: the arts and sciences, everything that comes in with your education, all those things have their origin not in our good qualities, but in our bad qualities. So, jurisprudence, you can come to AUIS and study law, and that, if you want a fancy name for studying law, it's jurisprudence. That's the science of knowing how to behave in court and how to win your case. Where does it come from? Well, not from our justice, of course. Even if we have a justice department which oversees the courts, it comes from our injustice. If we were just, we wouldn't have any need of laws or courts. And so forth, and in the same way for other disciplines. You know, what do we study when we study history? Good people behaving well? Not at all. What we see are tyrants and wars, conspirators, people who plot against the king and kill him by stealth in order to take over. And it's those upheavals, those terrible injustices, and the great periods of violence. That's what makes up the study of history. So there again, a science of which we think we should be proud. And even our universities require you to study this. It comes not from things that should make human beings proud, but things that should make us ashamed. It comes from the long record of our bad qualities in action. So what shall we say in general about the sciences and the arts and getting an education, advancing yourself in education? Well, Rousseau calls this sterile contemplation. Right? Things that are sterile can't grow. So these abstract studies don't lead to anything. They're mere contemplation, thinking about stuff rather than doing. And what do we oppose that to? Well, human duties and natural needs. What really counts in life? Well, your duties, those are your moral obligations, the things that you must do in order to be a good or at least respectable person, and true needs, which are the natural needs, the ones that come from your nature rather than from conventions. The food you need to nourish yourself, not the fancy restaurant where it's cool to be seen. So what we should concentrate on are our duties and our needs. And what are they? In the simplest case, at bottom, what are the fundamental ones? Well, you're a patriot. You worry about your homeland. You're charitable. You worry about the people less lucky than you are, who have suffered and don't have what they need. And then, of course, your friends. You're loyal and helpful, and you think about others beyond yourself. And this is the simple logic of the argument and a solid core. And if you keep this in mind, it will allow you to understand many of Rousseau's arguments. Whatever point he's making, it's probably something that has to do with this. The things that we do as society advances in science and the arts are not useful and not fundamentally necessary. They're sterile. Because what is useful, what's fundamentally necessary, what really counts are our duties and our needs. And those are very few things. You worry about your friends. You worry about people who are worse off than you are and who need your help. You worry about your nation, the group you belong to, and its needs.